Hello, welcome in. Today I'm just here to talk about some of the books that I've read recently. It's basically 3 months worth of books because I haven't filmed a wrap-up since the beginning of the year. Good job me. So, buckle up. The first book that I have to talk about is Our Wives Under the Sea. This is a horror, although to me it wasn't so much scary. It's basically about a woman whose wife is a marine biologist and she goes on a submarine. The mission gets messed up and they end up down there for way longer than they were supposed to be down there. And when she finally does come back, there's something off about her and she's not herself anymore. And we basically watch her wife watching her becoming more and more not herself day by day. And it's in kind of a weird horror way. And we do get some scenes on the submarine, which were really weird and creepy. But ultimately, for me, this was more of just a really sad and really moving emotional exploration of loss and grief. The next book I want to talk about is called Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. Also a horror about a bunch of people becoming brainwashed and basically possessed by a news station called Fax News. The main character is a man from New York who, when this all starts happening, he hasn't heard from his parents who live in Virginia or something in a while. So he's going back down to check on his family and he realizes that this has taken over his entire family. The only one left who's not affected is his 4-year-old nephew. So he's basically trying to get his nephew back to New York with him as they traverse this kind of basically a zombie apocalypse kind of world. I really liked the premise of this and I think it could have been really interesting. I feel the same way about this author's other book, Ghost Eaters, in that it's a really meaningful premise which could have explored really important topics in a really powerful and disturbing way, but instead it got overshadowed by just trying to be ridiculous, disgusting, shock value bullshit. But so many things in here just felt nasty for the sake of being nasty and icky, and instead of adding to the topics at hand, it just took away from them. The vision was so clear. I don't understand how it veered so far off course from all the things it should have been doing and discussing and the messages it should have been driving home. I guess it was more important to just show a bunch of disgusting things. I don't know. I didn't like it. Obviously. The next book that I read was a arc from Penguin Teen for Lies on the Serpent's Tongue, which is the sequel to Bittersweet in the Hollow, which is basically a fantasy thriller set in a small Appalachian town, and it deals with cryptids and generational family magic. Obviously the plot of the sequel gets a bit spoilery, but I will say that the vibes are immaculate. For me, this is such a perfect blend of cozy and whimsical, but also dark and mysterious, and it has so much charm. Overall, I do like the first one better, but I still loved this so much and I highly recommend the series. Then I listened to an audiobook production of Know Your Newlywed. It was so fun. I listened to it on Librofm, which, if you don't know, is the best audiobook platform ever. Your purchases go to support local or indie bookstores. And if you want to check it out, I do have a referral link in the box down below. But basically this had a full cast and the sound effects and the music and all the whole production. And it's a romance between two people who just met on a dating app and realized that they both loved the TV show Know Your Newlywed, which is basically the Newlywed Game. They find out that the show is getting rebooted, and so they decide to pretend to be newlyweds so that they can get onto their favorite show. This was such a fun, wonderful audiobook experience. I really enjoyed it. Next, I have Everything is Poison by Joy McCullough, and I think by now we know that I love a Joy McCullough book. She does historical fiction through a modern feminist lens. For example, her other book that I really loved, Blood, Water, Paint, is about the 1600s painter Artemisia Gentileschi and her decision to go to court against the man who sexually assaulted her. And one thing about Joy McCullough is that her topics always seem to be really, really timely, because that book came out during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings and when the Me Too movement was really gaining a lot of traction, and it just fit so well into those prominent conversations that were happening. And this book, which came out this year, is about Acqua Tofana and the women in Italy who ran the apothecary that would give women poison so that they could kill their abusive husband, or for example herbs to help with an abortion during a time period when there were often no other ways for women to get out of a marriage or get out of a pregnancy. And these women who ran the apothecary were really risking their lives to help women when no one, the government, the church, no one was on women's side. And even besides that, just smaller things helping people who have arthritis or who have migraines or whatever pain or sickness that they might be going through. It's ultimately just about the responsibility to help people. And again, I think this book is really timely. That theme of like, if we don't have anybody else, we have to take care of each other and we have to recognize our responsibility to each other as a community. Like, there are people in this book who absolutely hate each other, but they still understand that they have to have each other's backs. And even besides all these heavy themes, like, the writing style was beautiful. Dare I even say this book was kind of downright cozy. Like, this whole apothecary daily life situation of this tight-knit family running their apothecary together. It was actually so good, and I recommend this on so many different levels. Next, I have a series I read that became an immediate favorite. Immediately, and that was the Kiss of Deception series. I loved this so much. This is a fantasy from like 2014, and you can tell, and I mean that as like the highest compliment, because this hit the spot so perfectly. It's about a princess who is running away from an arranged marriage with a prince of another kingdom. So her and her bestie, lady in waiting, like run away together to this little seaside village to start a new life as tavern waitresses, living in a cottage together. And honestly, like, come on. That could have been it for me. I would have read a whole series of that. But also, the princess is being hunted down by two men. One of them is the prince who she was supposed to get married to, and he's trying to come find her. And the other one is an assassin from another kingdom who's sent to kill her. And the cool thing is we actually get point of view chapters from both of them, but you don't know which one is which. Incredible, delightful, amazing. The only complaint that I have, honestly, is that I was on the losing side of the love triangle. And not very many books anymore can even make me care that much about anything anymore. So the fact that this love triangle hurt me, it was a kind of pain that was actually really fun to experience. And also, I thought that this felt really well done. It was like really high, like, in my opinion, really high quality, well done YA fantasy. So for me, this was top tier. Then I read the Kaiju Preservation Society, which is kind of like a really fun sci-fi thing. It's about a guy who's like desperate for a job, and he finally takes one, and he finds out it's at a Kaiju Preservation Society. So they're at this like top secret base on an island, and there are varying kinds of Godzilla monsters just wandering around, and they need to be observed and studied and protected. It was like really funny and lighthearted, and then it also goes into these mundane bureaucracy situations, like how the preserve has to maintain its funding by allowing its donors occasionally to like come tour the facilities, and everybody hates that because they're like annoying rich tourists. But then obviously as the story goes on, some bigger problems start cropping up and things get a bit more serious, and it goes into kind of like corporate power and military power versus like the importance of science and research, and it was just really cool. I really enjoyed this. The next book that I read was Alice by Christina Henry. This is obviously an Alice in Wonderland retelling, and it's like a dark and gritty one that goes into like mental illness and drugs and crime and violence, which is nothing new. I think that's such a common direction for Alice in Wonderland retellings to take. And listen, I do like that. I actually love that. One of the first video games that I ever played in my life was American McGee's Alice, which was so fucked up, and I was 8 years old and I loved it. I was like, this is the perfect, they made this for me. This is gonna be my personality. Like, I love it, especially for Alice in Wonderland. I think dark Alice in Wonderland it's so good. But there is a certain flavor of dark and gritty, and I don't really know how to explain it. It's just a particular vibe that some things have that really rubs me the wrong way. And this book had that particular flavor to it. So I don't know, I did enjoy it, and I even considered moving on to the sequel because I liked it, but at the same time I hated it and I couldn't stand it. There were so many things that I was like, wow, that's a really cool take on that, or like that's a really cool interpretation of this scene. But then there were others that just made me cringe. It was like, okay, we get it. You're dark and gritty. Things that I can't even really explain. They just give me the ick. So even though I really did like this in a lot of ways, ultimately I decided not to continue with it. But one thing that it really did do for me is it reminded me of how much I absolutely love Alice in Wonderland. And it made me really want to spend some time like going back to some of my favorite Alice in Wonderland stuff and like immersing myself in Alice in Wonderland this year. So I think I might do a themed vlog. It'll be a while away, but I'm really looking forward to that. And I know that Christina Henry also has some other retellings that I think look really interesting, so I'm still gonna try out some of those and see if they jive with me a little bit more. All right, next Next up, we've got Jade Green, and I have been yapping about this for a while now, so I'm sorry to repeat myself again, but this is a book I read in middle school. I really loved it. Recently, thought about it again, bought a copy so that I could relive my childhood ghost story glory days. This is about a girl in like the 1800s who's going to live with her uncle after her parents die, and he has this beautiful big house, but there's one rule in this house, and that is that you're not allowed to bring anything green inside the house. Like, no explanation, just nothing green is allowed in the house. Like, they're eating their vegetables on the patio outside because you can't bring green beans in the house, right? It's not allowed. But the girl, like, she can't bear to part with a photograph she has of her mother in a green velvet picture frame. So she hides it in the bottom of her trunk and brings it into the house. Shortly after, there starts to be some, you know, ghostly happenings, creepy things going on in the house. This was so fun to read again after all these years, and it was actually really surprisingly intense. Some like really serious and heavy topics are brought up in here, which honestly I didn't remember at all. You know, I think if you were a kid of like the early 2000s and you liked the kind of kid-aimed horror that was around back then, this is the perfect example of it if you want to go back and relive some of those memories. The next book that I want to talk about is All the Blues in the Sky. This is about a 13-year-old girl whose best friend has passed away, and the story just kind of follows her working through that. She's in like a counseling group with other kids who have lost people, and we just see her journey through like growing to understand what it means to lose someone and have to go on without them. I think this is such a beautiful book for young people to learn about that, and it's also told partly in verse and vignettes, so just like really short poetic snippets. I listened to the audiobook and it was so beautiful and wonderful. I really recommend it. Then I have this book that Allie bought me last summer when she was visiting Germany, and we went to a bookstore together. And me and her and Starzy just got around to buddy reading it together, and I think we all really liked it. It is so cute. It's about like several people who are at a point of like struggle in their life, and they come across this magical coffee shop, which is run by cats, talking cats, and they serve them like magical treats and basically share like astrology wisdom with them about what they're going through and what point of their life they're in. And it was really sweet. Honestly, I wish that I could go to this cafe. Somebody got served pancakes and the syrup was like starlight. It's just beautiful. I want that. The next audiobook that I listened to was I'm That Girl. This is the memoir of Jordan Chiles. She's an Olympic gymnast. I loved this, and I am such a Jordan Chiles fan now. She talks about her entire life journey with gymnastics, all of the high points and the successes and the achievements that she's done, but also she talks about the low points, the times when she maybe felt not good enough, the bad experiences, the negative sides of the environment in general, how it's like exploitative, and especially all of the kind of like racial injustice that she faced that is really prevalent in the gymnastics world. One of the big events that she talks about is the fact that she won the bronze medal at the Olympics, and this was a really big deal because it was an all-black podium. All three medalists on this podium were Black girls, and it was like this really important historical moment. And then months later, they stripped her of her medal out of nowhere, and for reasons that were like really not reasons that anyone had ever been stripped of a medal before. Like, people lose their medals all the time and stuff, but the way this happened was not normal. And even after her legal team proved over and over and over again in court that she did everything correctly, basically the Olympics were like, oh well, we already did it and there's nothing we can do about it now. And there's so much shit, but there's also so many moments of like wonderful things happening where I was like, wow, she's iconic. And honestly, I've never really cared about the Olympics or sports that much, but after reading this, I went and watched so many of her gymnastics videos because I just think she's so cool. Like, even though she's dedicated to her dreams, she's not willing to achieve them in any way that would force her to sacrifice her own life or forces her to not be herself. And yeah, and reading this, I gained so much respect and admiration for her and her outlook on everything. And yeah, I highly, highly recommend this. The next book that I have is Deadstream, which I was really excited about. The premise sounds really cool. It's about a teenage girl who is a streamer, and she is watching her favorite like famous streamer, and she sees him get attacked by a paranormal entity on live stream, and then he starts like acting weird, and this paranormal thing seems to be spreading through people's streams, like kind of The Ring style. And she's trying to warn people and like figure out what's happening. It sounded really fun. I really like this kind of technology, internet-based horror, and it can be really interesting. And I will say, honestly, I think this book integrated those like online elements and multimedia stuff really well. Like it felt really organic, and I felt like the author really understood what it's like to be an online person. But I also don't think that this book executed the horror story very well. A lot of the horror elements felt kind of really arbitrary and like random, and I think that they wanted to connect to the larger themes in some way, but they really didn't in any way that felt satisfying or made sense. And while it touched on a lot of really important, really interesting topics like internet addiction, online communities, parasocial relationships, mental health issues, death, grief, it never really brought any of them home or into any kind of clear focus. Like it never actually said anything important about any of them. It all just really felt scattered and like nothing connected or came together, and it never fell into like a coherent or meaningful structure for me. But still, I read it in like 1 or 2 sittings because it was just fun to read. So I would still recommend this as like a silly little popcorn read. The next book that I want to talk about is A Catalog of Burnt Objects, and I knew that I had to read this book because it is about the 2018 wildfire that destroyed Paradise, California, which is the town that I was born in and where my family lives. The fire really affected my family. My grandma lost so much and is still, even all these years later, kind of working through putting her life back together. And I think that this book really explored all of the stuff that comes with that experience, alongside a coming of age story of a teenage girl in this town going through all of that on top of all the normal teenage girl stuff that comes with growing up and coming of age in a small town. The main character of this book is in high school, and she's working towards hopefully leaving this town someday. Like she wants to get out. She wants to go somewhere better and make something bigger out of her life. But that's also balanced against a lot of love that she has for her town and her family and all the good and bad things that come with that. You know, she lives right next door to her grandparents. Her family owns like the flower shop in town, but also like her brother struggles with addiction, and he's actually just returning home from like a rehab program. And it's just like this really nuanced look at like the really bright side as well as the kind of darker side of growing up and coming of age in a small town like that. And the vibes of this town were so perfect. Like I know that the author is also from Paradise, and she truly captured the essence of it so perfectly. And then as far as the fire stuff, she really captured like the horror of the event itself, but then also the loss and grief and frustration in how the aftermath of it was all handled. Like the title, A Catalog of Burnt Objects, and every section in the book starts with an entry, which is like a log that someone has made for an item that they lost in the fire. And this is obviously something that people had to do and catalog for insurance purposes, but every item in this book is something that's actually just really sentimental and irreplaceable, like a little clay sculpture that their child made for them in school, or the dried corsage from their high school prom, or the cassette tape that their grandpa used to play in the car. Because I remember watching my grandma put this together, and it was like, okay, yeah, she can tell them that she lost her tractor and they're gonna pay for that, but how do you explain the things you lost that are like the tree in her front yard where her kids used to play? Like there are so many things that just can't be compensated, and even the things that it can be hasn't been. Like even all these years later, I know people are still fighting over these insurance payouts and who gets paid what, and how much are the lawyers gonna take, and how much does the power company that started the fire in the first place have to pay. And like it took so long to get distributed, and so long for people to even get the okay to go back to their homes and try to salvage or rebuild what they can. Like there was just so much frustration and loss and unfairness, and this book portrays so much of it, but it also captures the kind of like hope and perseverance of the community, like coming together and looking towards the future and figuring out a way to get through it. And I think it was so beautiful. I really loved it, even though there was some stuff that was like for me, like the romance, but like the overall picture, like it was so good, and I highly recommend it. And finally, the last book that I want to talk about is Love in Bloom by Lucy Eden. This was a really cute romance about a woman who inherits a farm from her grandparents, and when she goes there to check it out, there's like this farm manager who lives there and works the farm, who is like making sure she's okay while she learns the ropes of the farm and stuff like that, because she's kind of a city girl. But there's also something suspicious about the farm, and the main character is pretty sure that secrets are being kept from her in this town. Honestly, I loved this. It was the perfect spring romance. It was so cute. The pacing was perfect for me. The like tension between the cute romance and the kind of mysterious, like what's going on in this town. I loved the farm vibes. The love interest is also a horticulturalist, so he breeds flowers. So there's also a lot of like florals for spring. Groundbreaking, I know, but like the vibes were so good for a little spring read. I really loved this. And those are all of the books that I read in the last 3 months. Sorry that there were so many. Thank you for hanging out if you did. I hope that this video was helpful or you got some recommendations. And I would love to know what is the best or worst thing that you have read recently. I'd love to know what you're up to and chat and stuff in the comments. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope I get to talk to you soon. Bye!